What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. In this video, I'm going to be doing a 1,000-yard penetration test with my 300 Win Mag rifle, and I'm going to be shooting some Norma Bondstrike and some Barnes LRX ammo at some 2x10 framing lumber, and I want to see what kind of penetration I get at 1,000 yards and what kind of expansion I get with these bullets. So I'm going to be using some factory ammo, and the reason why I'm using factory ammo is that out of my 20-inch barrel 300 Win Mag, with this factory ammo, I'm actually getting pretty low velocities. So that's actually a good thing for this test, because I want to see if the Barnes LRX can expand at low velocities, and also if the Norma Bondstrike can expand at low velocities. Now, I've already done this test at 800 yards minus the Norma Bondstrike, but I've done the LRX, and I've also done Spear Hot Core and Nosler AccuBond, all 180 grain bullets, with the exception of the LRX, which is 175. I've done all three of those at 815 yards. If you want to see that test, I'll leave a link in the top right corner. But basically all of the bullets expanded at 815 yards. Even the LRX expanded to over 40 caliber, actually even 45 caliber. And that was with an impact velocity of around 1,600 feet per second and 1,000 foot-pounds. So the LRX expanded down to 1,600 feet per second. So now I want to push it a little further to 1,010 yards and see if the LRX will expand at around 1,375 feet per second, and that's going to have an impact energy of 736 foot-pounds, which is about the same energy as a 10 millimeter with some hot barrel loads. And the muzzle velocity of the ammo I'm using with the LRX is going to be around 2,850 feet per second, and that has a muzzle energy of 3,156 foot-pounds. And the company I'm using is Choice Ammunition, and they're a boutique ammo company similar to Buffalo Bore. They make high quality hand loaded ammunition. If you're not a hand loader, I highly recommend going to Choice Ammunition. I actually hand load, and I have hand loads that are a lot hotter than this particular load. I have a hand load that can generate 2950, but I didn't want to use that load because I wanted to see if the LRX would expand at 1,010 yards with an impact velocity of just under 1,400 feet per second, which is really pushing it for the LRX. They're not supposed to expand at such a low velocity, but nevertheless, that's what we're going to test. And we're also going to test some Norma Bondstrike, and the Norma Bondstrike is advertised to have a muzzle velocity of 3,084 feet per second and a muzzle energy of 3,800 foot-pounds, and that's a 180 grain bullet. But out of my 20-inch barrel Ruger M77 Hawkeye Alaskan, I only get a muzzle velocity of around 2,750 feet per second, which generates 3,022 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, so significantly less velocity. And I think they actually over-advertise the velocity, because I can't even see with a 24 or 26-inch barrel how I could even get almost 3,100 feet per second if I'm getting only 2,750 out of a 20-inch barrel. So I think they over-advertise the velocity, but that's actually good, because like I said, I want to see what kind of expansion we would get at low velocities. So the impact velocity at 1,010 yards is going to actually be 1,525 feet per second, and the impact energy is going to be 925 foot-pounds. and I'm using the ballistics coefficient that Norma provides on their website, which is surprisingly high, with a G1 ballistics coefficient of 0.615, which seems to be a little bit high for a 180 grain bullet. That's pretty high. So I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's what they say. So I'm going to go off of what they say. All right. So, and the choice ammunition LRX, that has a ballistics coefficient of 0.508. So the Norma Bondstrike is on paper a really good bullet. It's basically better than the AccuBond long range. It gets a better BC and in a lighter bullet, so that lets you push it faster. So on paper it's superior to the AccuBond long range, but we'll see how it does at 1,010 yards with an impact velocity of 1,525 feet per second. And it still carries a lot of energy at 1,000 yards, 925 foot-pounds. That's like a 44 Magnum, so a lot of energy even at 1,000 yards. So let's see what happens here, guys. I'm really curious to see what kind of penetration we get. How many pieces of lumber is this ammunition going to be able to penetrate through at 1,000 yards? And what kind of expansion are we going to get? And let me just give you guys a close-up look at the rifle and the ammo. So here we have the ammo. We have the choice ammunition, 175 grain LRX here on the left. And then we have the Norma Bondstrike on the right. It's actually hard to tell them apart. It would be easy to accidentally fire the wrong one because they look almost identical. They have those blue tips, but you can tell the LRX compared to the Bondstrike because the LRX has a little bit of a brighter color than the Bondstrike. If you look closely, you can see that the Bondstrike has like a little bit of a darker hue than the LRX. But there they are, 300 Winchester Magnum powerhouse round. I love the 300 Win Mag. It's my favorite all-around practical hunting and SHTF cartridge for long-range applications. And so Choice Ammunition advertises 3,022 feet per second. I'm guessing that's out of a 26-inch barrel. And like I said, out of my 20-inch barrel Ruger M77 Alaskan, I only get around 2850. So that seems about accurate. There are numbers there. And then here we have the Norma Bondstrike. And velocity on this one just super low, only 2750. But they advertise extreme precision at long range, boat tail design, expansion at all distances. So we'll have to wait and see. They have here thin front jacket for expansion at low velocities. So let's see if that actually happens, if it actually expands. And here's my rifle. This is a Silencer Co. Omega 300. This is the Ruger M77 Alaskan. I know a lot of you guys think it's dumb to have a 20-inch barrel 300 Win Mag, but I still can get 3,500 foot-pounds with hand loads. I can push a 180 grain bullet to 3,000 feet per second with hand loads. So it's still a lot more powerful than a 30-06. I have an Athlon 2.5 to 15 power scope on here. I have a Sniper Tools bubble level and angle cosine indicator. So really love this rifle, and I have a Timney trigger set to about 2 pounds. And I have this Hogue stock that has an aluminum bed block, which is really nice because it keeps it really stiff in the forend. And it's a really good stock. It has that nice pistol grip sweep there, so it's comfortable to shoot prone or off a bench. And this rifle is perfect for Alaska because you get the iron sights with it. And that's one of the main reasons I bought it, is I wanted to have a rifle with iron sights, because if I ever go to Alaska and I'm on a backpacking trip looking for gold or If I'm on a brown bear hunt or a caribou hunt and something happens to my scope, I want to have some backup iron sights. Same thing for an SHTF situation, and that suppressor works fantastic with this 300 Win Mag. So let's get started shooting. Let's see how many pieces of 2x10 lumber I can penetrate through with these rounds at 1,000 yards. And let's see if we get any expansion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to screw these boards together into like a giant block. I'm going to shoot at that block, and then I'm going to unscrew the block, and we're going to go through each board one by one and see how many boards they penetrated through. We'll see what kind of wound channel we get. Now, I know a lot of you guys out there say, well, it's wood. You know, wood doesn't really mimic living tissue well. And I have to disagree. You know, wood has a high moisture content, so it's not like it's totally dry like you're shooting at a block of concrete. It does have moisture, and it seems to work great. And what I like about wood is it's cheaper than ballistics gel, but it's better than using water, especially at long distances, because I can actually see how much penetration I get, how many boards the different rounds penetrate through, and then I can do a comparison with other rounds. If you're just shooting at water, water is not as precise because you could have two completely different cartridges and they'll penetrate the same amount of water. But if you shoot those two cartridges at wood, you'll have a very different result. So that's why I use wood. So let's see what happens here, guys. 1,000 yards, LRX, Bondstrike. Will they expand? And how much penetration will we get? I think that was a hit. It's like All right, guys, so I want to go over the results of the test. It was a really windy day when I was shooting. I missed a lot, but I managed to get 2 good hits with each of them. 2 hits with the LRX, 2 hits with the Norma Bondstrike. So the LRX and the Norma Bondstrike both penetrated through 5 Douglas fir 2x12s at 1,009 yards, and they also penetrated only through 3 on the left block over here because they hit a knot. So that knot stopped further penetration. In the 4th board, they hit a huge knot. And that knot stopped both of those bullets, but the LRX and the Norma Bondstrike both penetrating through 5 2x12s at 1,009 yards. And just to give you an idea of how much penetration that is, obviously each one of these is 1.5 inches thick. So if you do the math, you're talking 7.5 inches of wood at 1,000 yards. That's pretty impressive. And so once again, the Barnes LRX from Choice Ammunition hit this wood with a velocity of 1,375 feet per second and an impact energy of 736 foot-pounds. And the Norma Bondstrike hit this wood with a velocity of 1,525 feet per second and an energy of 925 foot-pounds. What's interesting is that the LRX had 100 foot per second higher muzzle velocity than the Norma Bondstrike and 100 foot-pounds more of muzzle energy, but at 1,010 yards, the impact velocity of the Norma Bondstrike was actually 150 feet per second higher and also 200 more foot-pounds. So as you can see, ballistics coefficient makes a huge difference because the Norma Bondstrike, although it had such a low muzzle velocity, it has such a high ballistics coefficient of 0.615 that it retains so much velocity and energy. And even though the LRX had more energy and speed up close, it lost a lot more at longer distances because its ballistics coefficient was much lower. So I want to go through all these boards with you now, one by one. So here we have the first board. Here's the LRX. Here's the Norma. Here's the back of the first board. Very small exit holes. That tells me that we didn't get a whole lot of expansion here. I mean, you can barely see any kind of big exit hole. I mean, very small. And here we have the second board, and here are 2 hits in the second board. You can see a nice, good size hole here from the LRX. And here's the Norma Bondstrike. Here's the back of the second board. Here's the LRX hole. Here's the Bondstrike hole. Pretty small holes. What's interesting is the LRX actually has a bigger exit hole than the Norma Bondstrike on this one. Pretty interesting. Here we have the third board. Okay, LRX, Bondstrike. Here's the back of the third board. LRX, Bondstrike. Not much of an exit hole, not much expansion going on. LRX, Bondstrike, fourth board. Here's the back of the fourth board. Not much of an exit hole really at all. Okay, not much expansion going on, at least from what I can see right now. And then here we have the fifth board. Here are 2 shots, LRX, Bondstrike. Here's the back of the fifth board. Here's the Bondstrike hole. And then here's the LRX hole. So as you can see, not a lot of expansion here, but still a lot of penetration. 5 boards at 1,010 yards. And then here's the 6th board. And here we have our bullets. Okay, so here's our Bondstrike. Here's our LRX. You can see the LRX is actually deeper. Okay, the base of the bullet is flush with the wood. And you can see that the Bondstrike, the base is popping out a little bit. You can actually see the boat tail of the bullet. Okay, so I'm going to pull these out of the wood. I got to use a drill. I got to drill around it and pull it out carefully so I don't do any damage. And if you're not careful, you can break off the petals when you're trying to pry them out of the wood. And then that's going to defeat the whole purpose of this test, because I want to see what kind of expansion we got. I want to be able to measure the expansion. So if I'm too aggressive in trying to take these bullets out, I'm going to damage them and I'm not going to be able to get a good measurement on them. So I'm going to take my time, remove these, and let me show you guys the other block over here. So here was our LRX hole right there, Norma Bondstrike. Here we have the back of the first board. Bondstrike and LRX, you can barely see the holes. It's like you can't even see them at all, actually. Here's the second board, LRX and Bondstrike. Looks like there was a lot more expansion for some reason on this one. Look at this hole here, okay? Pretty big hole. Bondstrike, LRX, huge difference here. Back of the second board. Here's the third board, and now you can really see how that Bondstrike expanded quite a bit. Here's my finger for comparison, and my finger basically takes up that whole hole there. So, you know, that's probably a good 5/8 inch diameter hole there, or maybe even bigger. And then the LRX just zipping through, okay? Here's the back of the third board. Weird, there's like not much of an exit hole. I'm wondering if it's trapped in here actually. And here's the fourth board. You can see our LRX is stuck in this knot here. Look at this big old knot. You can see the LRX is just, there's the LRX right there, stuck in that knot. So you can see how that knot stopped any further penetration, and it also stopped that Bondstrike, because the Bondstrike is stuck in this board, and you can see it just didn't have enough energy to punch through here because you had this giant knot there. So I'm going to pull these bullets out now, and then we're going to take a closer look at them, and we're going to see what kind of weight retention we got, and most importantly, what kind of expansion we got. So stay tuned. All right, guys, so here are the bullets. These two bullets on the left are the ones that got stopped by that big knot. And then these two on the right just penetrated through the wood. They went through 5 Douglas fir 2x10s and not much expansion. Look at the LRX. Very little expansion with the LRX, almost none. And it lost a pedal here. You can see one pedal right there broke off. So very little expansion with the LRX. Okay, barely anything. Still some expansion, but basically just the tip started to open, and that was it. But again, wood is dry. You know, it's not full of water like living tissue, so I'm sure the expansion would be at least 25% more if you were shooting at game, especially if you hit a bone or something. You would definitely get more expansion. So there's the LRX impact velocity, 1,375 feet per second, 1,010 yards. This is the kind of expansion you would get at that low of a velocity, in wood at least. And then here we have the Norma Bondstrike, also not expanding much. Pretty disappointed. I was expecting the Bondstrike to expand a lot more, especially because it's a jacketed bullet and it's not solid. So basically just one side of the nose expanded or just got flattened out a little bit. So pretty interesting. And let me just measure the expansion here with our calipers. So we still got 40 caliber expansion, so still pretty good. It's not bad at all. And if we look the other way, 0.343 inches. So I guess you would get away with this if you were shooting at deer or deer-sized game at 1,000 yards, but not an elk. It's just not going to do enough damage. If you're using this for anti-personnel purposes, then sure, it's fine. You don't need a lot of expansion. Same thing with the LRX. And in fact, this would actually be better in an anti-material situation, which is why I like the LRX bullets, because they're just solid copper, and if they encounter a hard object, they just shear off their petals, and they basically function like a solid. They just penetrate through. So you can see the difference there between the LRX and the Norma Bondstrike. LRX impacting the wood at 1,375 feet per second. Norma Bondstrike 1,525 feet per second. Not too impressed with the Norma Bondstrike, especially for an impact velocity of just over 1,500 feet per second. I would expect more. I mean, the LRX with an impact velocity of around 1,500 feet per second at 800 yards had better expansion than the Bondstrike did at 1,500 feet per second. So a little bit disappointed with the Bondstrike, but what's interesting is you can see how that knot made a huge difference in the expansion of these bullets. Look at how that knot forced these bullets to expand a lot more, okay? Look at the LRX, how much expansion it got after hitting that knot. And I jacked up the bullet here a little bit trying to get it out of that knot, but pretty impressive expansion, and it actually broke off 2 of its petals, or maybe I broke them off when I was prying it out of that knot, but that's pretty impressive. So if we compare the bullet that was stuck in the knot to the one that just went through the regular wood, huge difference there. Look at that, massive difference. So still it expanded quite a bit. It just needed to hit something hard enough to make it expand. So pretty impressive there. And then here we have the Bondstrike. You can see the difference between the Bondstrike that hit the knot and the one that didn't hit the knot. On the left is the one that hit the knot, but still pretty similar in terms of the way they expanded. Just one side got flattened out, and then the other side kind of just did that. So let's just measure this LRX. I'm pretty impressed by that. I really love the LRX bullets. I think they're fantastic. 0.550 of expansion. That is crazy. And then it would be the same on the other side if we had the petals, but they broke off. I think actually I might have broken them off, but even without the petals, 0.383. So pretty impressive. And then here we have the Bondstrike, 0.550 on one side, and then we got 0.398 on the other. So pretty impressive. So let's weigh these bullets now. I'm going to start with the LRX that hit the knot. 165.3, so it only lost 10 grains. Really impressive. Here we have the Bondstrike that hit the knot. 175.2, only lost 5 grains, so that's really impressive. Now these are bonded, so that's, you know, that's pretty impressive. And here we have the other Bondstrike that did not hit the knot. 180, so 100% weight retention there. And then here we have the other LRX that didn't hit the knot. 173.5, so really good weight retention, as you would expect with such a low impact velocity. But that's pretty much it for this one, guys. To see more of my 300 Win Mag content and more of my long range shooting and my long range penetration tests, Check out my long range shooting playlist and my 300 Win Mag playlist. I'll leave a link in the top right corner. And I'll also leave a link to the 800 yard test. And then I'll also leave a link to my 300 rum 1,000 yard test with Norma Bondstrike. And those performed much differently because the 300 rum, I got like 500 feet per second higher muzzle velocity. So I'm actually thinking of pulling all of my Norma Bondstrike bullets out of the factory ammo and just hand loading them, because at 2,700 feet per second, I mean, that's just not doing justice for the 300 Win Mag. I could hand load those easily up to 3,000 feet per second, even in my 20-inch barrel. So that's pretty much it for this one, guys. Take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 Ps. Prepare, practice, and persevere.